She was wearing her uniform, showed her identification, and followed all the rules. So why did two officers still handcuff her? The answer cost them everything. There was nothing unusual about that stretch of road on the outskirts of Tucson, Arizona. It was early, just after 7:30, and the chill in the air hadn't yet dissipated. Sergeant Elena Ramírez had driven that road hundreds of times before. She knew every curve, every pothole, every crooked sign that led from her neighborhood to the highway. Her dark green 2014 Toyota RAV4 was almost out of gas. She hadn't eaten breakfast yet, so she thought about grabbing something small at the station before heading to the reserve base at Davis-Monthan. Training weekend. She didn't love it, but she didn't hate it either. It was part of her life, her rhythm. She pulled into the Sinclair station on Nogales Avenue, tucked just behind a strip of shuttered businesses and a Dollar General. It wasn't exactly the best part of town, but it was far from the worst. Elena was in uniform, her camouflage fatigues neatly pressed, her boots tightly laced. Her nameplate and rank were proudly displayed on her chest. Her duffel bag stood upright in the back seat, packed the night before with her field gear. She glanced at it as she got out, feeling that same pull of discipline that had kept her steady for the past 12 years. The Army Reserve wasn't her whole life, but it kept her grounded. As she swiped her card at the pump and selected regular gas, her phone buzzed. A text from her mom asking how she was. Elena smiled, always before a drill. She mumbled something, typed a quick reply, then opened a protein bar and took a bite while the tank filled. She didn't notice the white Chevy pulling up 2 pumps away. Not at first. Inside the SUV were 2 uniformed police officers from a nearby suburb. One younger, tall, with a buzz cut. The other older, stockier, quiet behind mirrored sunglasses. The younger one pointed at Elena, said something that made the older man shrug. Elena was putting the nozzle back when the first voice called out to her. "Excuse me, ma'am." She turned. "Yes, officer? Would you mind stepping away from the vehicle?" She blinked, confused. Is there a problem?" "Can you do it now?" he snapped. There was something in his tone, not just authority, but suspicion. It made her stomach tighten, but she stepped back, hands visible. The older officer got out and stood to the side, saying nothing. The younger one walked straight toward her. "Do you have ID?" "Of course," Elena said, slowly reaching into her uniform pocket. "I'm headed to the base. I'm Army Reserve." She held out her military ID in one hand and her driver's license in the other. The officer glanced at them, barely looking. "This uniform isn't a costume," she added quietly, not moving. "Who said it was?" he shot back. "We got a call about someone loitering and acting suspicious. Just doing our job." Elena said nothing. Her eyes flicked to the older officer. He still hadn't spoken, just watched. "You sure this ID is legit?" the younger one asked. "Excuse me." She exhaled slowly. "You think I'm impersonating a soldier?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer. "Turn around." Elena blinked. "You're detaining me?" He raised his voice. "Ma'am, I'm giving you a lawful order. Turn around. Hands behind your back." She looked at the older officer again, hoping for reason, but he nodded once, not with sympathy, just signaling compliance. Her fists clenched before she turned. "This is a mistake," she said, "and it's going to cost you." Her hands were pulled back. The cuffs clicked shut, tight, too tight. She winced but didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Someone across the parking lot yelled, "Hey, what are you doing? She's a soldier." The younger officer turned his head, annoyed. "Back off." But Elena wasn't thinking about the growing crowd or the eyes on her uniform. Her mind was already on the call she was about to make from the patrol car. The back seat of the cruiser smelled like old vinyl and sweat. The door slammed shut behind her with a finality that made her sit up straight. With her wrists still cuffed behind her, her breathing was steady, but her jaw was clenched. Her nameplate was half-cocked from how they'd grabbed her. She looked out the window, watching the younger officer strut around her vehicle like he'd just cracked a case. The older one stayed near the cruiser, arms crossed, eyes scanning the gas station like he was bored with the whole thing. Elena spoke loud enough to be heard through the small opening in the plexiglass barrier. "I want to call my commanding officer." The younger one didn't turn around. "You'll get your phone call at the station." "That's not how this works," she replied firmly. "This uniform gives me the right to contact my base immediately when detained." He finally turned. "You're being held on suspicion of impersonating military personnel. That's a federal offense. Sit tight." Elena didn't flinch. "I'm not going to sit here while you pretend this isn't racial profiling." He smirked. "Nobody said anything about race, ma'am. We got a call," we responded. She leaned forward. "You saw my ID, saw my license. My plates are on the window. You ignored all that and cuffed me anyway. Why?" He looked at her for a moment, like he was deciding whether to answer. Then he turned and walked away. Outside, a small crowd had gathered near the sidewalk. 2 young guys were filming with their phones. A woman in medical scrubs shouted something about knowing her rights. The air buzzed with tension, the kind you could feel in your teeth. The older officer got into the driver's seat, glanced at her in the mirror. "You should have stayed quiet." Elena met his eyes. "You should have done your job right." She shifted slightly, as much as the cuffs allowed. "Can I use my phone or not?" He hesitated, then muttered, "Make it quick." He reached out and dropped the phone onto her lap. Without unlocking the cuffs, she maneuvered it awkwardly, twisting to tap the screen with the side of her thumb. 2 quick swipes. A number. It rang twice. "Martinez." The voice was sharp. Alert. "Carlos, I'm handcuffed in the back of a police car in Tucson. They say I'm impersonating a soldier. I showed ID. They don't care." There was a pause. "Who's the officer who arrested you?" "I don't know yet. They didn't show badge names. 2 of them. White Chevy, Sinclair Station on Nogales. I'm 5 minutes away. I'm calling command. Keep the line open." The call went quiet, but she didn't hang up. The older officer glanced at her through the mirror again. "Who was that, your lawyer?" She didn't respond. Outside, the younger officer walked back toward the cruiser, now visibly agitated. "We're getting heat out here," he muttered to his partner. "Someone already posted a video. It's hitting Facebook." "I said 5 minutes." Carlos's voice came back. "You hear me?" "I hear you." The younger officer leaned toward the window. "Who's Carlos, your boyfriend?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "Try Colonel Carlos Martínez, 3rd Battalion Logistics. You're about to learn his name very well." That hit differently. The officer's jaw shifted slightly. He stepped back, now unsure. The energy was shifting. More people were recording. A car honked as it passed. The woman in medical scrubs shouted again, this time at the officer. "She's military, you idiots." But the officers didn't move fast enough, and the clock was ticking on whether this would end quietly or publicly. Colonel Carlos Martínez hadn't slept much the night before. That morning, he'd been at his desk early, halfway through his first cup of black coffee when his goddaughter's call came through. He recognized the tone in her voice immediately. Not fear, not panic, but control. Controlled anger, controlled humiliation. Carlos wasn't just a high-ranking officer. He was the kind of man who made things move when others stalled. Born in El Paso, hardened by years of deployments and bureaucratic politics, he'd seen systems work and he'd seen them break people. He wasn't about to let them break Elena. He set the coffee aside, grabbed his car keys, and dialed on Bluetooth as he pulled out of the parking lot. "Dispatch, this is Colonel Carlos Martínez. I need to confirm the location of Officers Burke and Robinson. I believe they've detained a service member at a gas station on Nogales Avenue." There was hesitation on the other end. "Sir, we typically don't. I'm not asking for typical. I'm requesting verification of an incident involving one of my logistics officers in uniform, allegedly accused of impersonating military personnel." The line went quiet. "We'll verify and report back, sir." "Good. You have 2 minutes." Carlos's next call was to a friend at City Hall. "Check traffic cams and confirm if there's a cruiser near the Sinclair on Nogales. I need confirmation now." Meanwhile, in the cruiser, Elena sat still. Her phone call hadn't ended. The line stayed open. She wanted them to know someone was listening. "You still with me?" Carlos asked again, his voice calm but firm. I'm here, she said. The crowd's growing. People are filming. Stay where you are. Don't move. Don't talk. Let them bury themselves. Too late for that. She glanced at the younger officer, now pacing. He pulled his radio. Dispatch, we've got a situation escalating. Civilian interference, requesting backup. Elena laughed under her breath. Backup for what, a handcuffed woman? That comment didn't go unnoticed. The younger officer snapped, you need to watch your mouth, ma'am. Or what, you'll tighten the cuffs more. The older officer spoke up from the front. You're not helping yourself. I'm not here to help you feel better about what you've done, she replied. Carlos's voice came back, loud. They're trying to cover themselves. I've got 3 calls going, including one to public affairs. Videos are coming in. It's moving. And it was at that moment that someone had posted a 90-second clip on Twitter. It showed Elena being handcuffed in uniform while trying to explain herself. Her calm voice contrasted sharply with the officer's tone. It was already being retweeted by local journalists. In a Tucson newsroom, a young editor named Marissa Lopez spotted it while scanning for breaking news. She clicked play, frowned, then picked up the phone. Yeah, we've got something brewing near Nogales Avenue. Military woman handcuffed in uniform. Want me to follow this? I'll go get interviews, check if she's still on site. Back at the gas station, more cars had pulled in, but no one was leaving. A woman in a red hoodie shouted, I've got it all on my phone. She told them she was military. The younger officer finally turned to the older one. We messed up. We should have verified her credentials properly. We can't backtrack now. Elena turned her head toward them. You still think I'm wearing this uniform for fun? The silence that followed was heavier than the cuffs on her wrists. A new police SUV pulled into the lot. A lieutenant stepped out, a middle-aged Latino man with a buzz cut and no expression. He didn't approach the crowd. He went straight to the cruiser, tapped on the window. Sergeant Ramírez. She looked up, surprised. Yes. I've been briefed by Colonel Martínez, and I've reviewed real-time footage. We're correcting this now. He opened the door himself and carefully removed her cuffs. On behalf of this department, I apologize. Elena didn't say anything right away. She stood slowly, rubbed her wrists, and looked straight at the 2 officers who had cuffed her. You don't mean it, she said dryly. You just got caught. But the apology wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much bigger, and Elena knew it. By the time Colonel Martínez arrived at the Sinclair station, the lieutenant had already cleared the scene. Elena was standing by her RAV4, arms crossed, jaw tight. Her duffel bag was still in the back seat, untouched. The pumps had stopped running long ago, but she hadn't moved. Carlos stepped out of his car without a word. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then he gave a slight nod, not of approval, not of relief, but of acknowledgement. She had held her ground. Are you okay? He asked quietly. She nodded. Yeah, just angry. Good use of it. Across the street, a local reporter was setting up a microphone, trying to catch witnesses before they scattered. One onlooker, the woman in medical scrubs, was already giving a detailed account, phone in hand. They cuffed her in uniform, she said into the mic, didn't even ask questions. She had ID, she told them, and they still slammed her against her own car like she was lying. The earlier video clip had hit over 60,000 views in 2 hours. By noon, it was at 180,000, and the comments weren't subtle. How does this keep happening? They saw a Latina in uniform and still didn't believe her. Fire them both. Carlos was already 2 steps ahead. He'd sent an email to the city's police oversight office, attaching both civilian footage and body cam videos acquired through alternate channels, citing the base commander, the city attorney, and the local military liaison officer. The footage didn't lie. It showed Elena calmly stating her name, providing credentials, asking if she was being detained. The younger officer barely glanced at her ID before turning her around. No warning, no confirmation. But worse, a few seconds caught on bodycam after she was cuffed, when the officers thought their audio was muted, the younger one had said, "You think she's one of those fake veterans? They've been doing that all year." The older one chuckled. Real or not, she had an attitude. Let her cool off in the car. Carlos watched the screen as the footage played. Then he said aloud to no one, idiots. That afternoon, the police department held a quiet internal meeting. The two officers, Burke and Robinson, were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The public relations rep wanted to issue a statement immediately. The chief disagreed. Too soon. Let it cool off. It won't, someone replied. Not this time. Meanwhile, back at the base, the news had already spread. Elena's fellow reservists weren't surprised. Anger simmered beneath the surface, not loud but steady. One sergeant told another, 15 years in. Never been cuffed in uniform. Wonder why that is. Elena didn't want to speak publicly. She ignored interview requests and blocked unknown numbers. She wasn't chasing headlines or needing applause, she wanted accountability. Carlos called again that night. You sure you don't want to make a statement? She was sitting on her couch, still in uniform. No. The footage speaks louder. He was quiet for a moment, then said, they'll try to spin it, paint you as confrontational. She sighed. Let them try. That night, one of the officers, Robinson, gave an off-the-record comment to a local paper, claiming the incident was overblown and that Elena had escalated things by refusing to obey basic orders. By the next morning, it backfired. More footage surfaced, longer angles, clearer audio. A retired Air Force major even commented on a live segment, if that woman had been white, they wouldn't have gone near those cuffs. The department's silence only made things worse, but behind the scenes, decisions were being made that would alter both officers' careers in ways neither saw coming. By Friday morning, the footage had hit every major Arizona outlet. It was no longer just a local incident, it was a headline, the kind that opened morning broadcasts and took over social media timelines. Army reservist unjustly detained in uniform. Body cam footage sparks outrage in Tucson. Woman in camo cuffed at the pump gone wrong. The Sinclair station where it happened had become an overnight landmark. News vans lined the street. Reporters asked passersby if they'd seen anything, heard about it, thought the officers went too far. Inside a bakery down the street, people argued over coffee. She showed ID. That should have ended it. Cops get calls like that all the time. Maybe they were just being cautious. You don't cautiously put someone in the back of a cruiser in cuffs, not in uniform. At her house, the phones hadn't stopped ringing. Some calls were from reporters, some from strangers offering support, and a few nasty ones telling her she should have complied or accusing her of playing the race card. She let most go to voicemail but read every message from fellow service members. One said, I've served 22 years. Never imagined I'd have to warn my daughter that even a uniform won't protect her. Another said, you did what many of us couldn't. You stood your ground while staying still. That one stuck with her. Meanwhile, the department scrambled. The mayor called an emergency press conference, standing stiffly beside the police chief, mumbling through a prepared statement. This city does not tolerate discrimination or misconduct of any kind. We've launched an internal review. We're in communication with military leadership and will address the matter with full transparency. But transparency came late that afternoon. The Police Oversight Office released a preliminary review confirming that both officers failed to follow standard ID verification procedures. More damning was their disregard for protocol involving military personnel, clearly outlined in their training manuals, which both officers had signed. Community groups rallied outside City Hall. Signs read, Cuffed for serving. Uniform protection. Justice for Sergeant Ramírez. Elena's name was now everywhere, though she hadn't spoken to a single reporter. She'd become a symbol, not because she asked for it, but because people saw themselves in her. At a nearby high school, a teacher paused her government class and played the footage. Look at this closely, she said. Then tell me what you see. Not just what happened, but why it happened, and why it keeps happening. Back at the station, the chief was under pressure. We need to act, his deputy said. We've got every local outlet breathing down our necks, plus 2 national networks looking to pick it up. Do we fire them now or after the review? Fire them yesterday, the deputy muttered. In a quiet meeting room, officers Burke and Robinson were brought in separately. Each was told the same thing: you're being placed on immediate unpaid suspension pending determination for conduct violations, failure to follow ID protocol, and unprofessional behavior. Burke tried to argue, claiming he feared she was a threat. She was unarmed, a board member replied, in uniform with ID, and you cuffed her. Robinson didn't argue. He sat, said nothing, and signed the form. When word got out that the officers had been removed, reactions poured in. Some cheered, some said it was overdue. A small segment defended the officers, saying they did their job under pressure, but most saw it for what it was: a mistake that had finally met consequences. At a small gathering that night, veterans lit candles outside the reserve base. They didn't chant, didn't shout, just stood there in silence. In solidarity. One of them, an older man in faded camo, held a sign that simply read, "We know what she stood for. Do you?" But even with accountability starting, the question lingered in the air: what happens next for Elena? And what happens the next time it's someone else? Elena sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap. It had been nearly a week since the gas station incident. She'd taken one day off from training, just one. She didn't want people looking at her differently, treating her as a victim or a symbol. She wasn't interested in being anyone's cause. She just wanted her respect back. Her boots were lined up by the door, laces clean and tucked. The uniform hanging in the closet looked the same as the one she'd worn that morning, but everything felt heavier now. A letter slid under her door around noon. Not an envelope, just a sheet folded once. She picked it up. Sergeant Ramírez, on behalf of the Tucson Police Department, we extend a formal apology for the actions taken against you on the morning of March 12th. An internal review has confirmed multiple protocol violations by Officers Burke and Robinson, both of whom have since been terminated. This letter does not undo what happened, but it is the first step in our acknowledgement of the error. It wasn't signed by the chief, just printed with his name. That told her everything she needed to know. A few days later, she was invited to speak at a city hall meeting. They wanted a statement, just a few words. She politely declined. She didn't owe them anything. Instead, she drove to the Veterans Association in Rancho del Sol. Some older veterans had asked her to stop by. Nothing formal, just to talk. Inside, a group of Latino, white, and black men and women sat quietly at folding tables, sipping black coffee and listening. Elena kept her voice steady. I didn't want this. I just wanted gas and a protein bar. But I couldn't ignore it either, not because I'm angry, but because I know there are kids watching. And I can't let them think silence is the answer. Someone clapped slowly, then more joined, but she raised a hand. I don't want applause. I want change. Back at City Hall, change came quietly. The department issued new guidelines for handling service members, including mandatory ID verification steps and required retraining on racial bias. A new liaison position was created between the department and the nearest reserve base. Small steps, but they happened. One of the younger officers at the precinct, Officer Torres, sent a message through the liaison. I wasn't on duty that day, but I've watched the video 10 times. I'm sorry for how you were treated. I'm going to do better. Elena read it twice before forwarding it to Carlos. He replied with one word: progress. But progress didn't erase everything. At her local grocery store, a woman whispered to her husband in the next aisle, "That's the soldier from the news." Some looked at her like a hero, others with judgment, as if she'd stirred the pot too much. She didn't react, just kept walking. One Saturday morning, she ran into the woman in medical scrubs from the gas station. The woman introduced herself as Lucia. I just want you to know, Lucia said, you weren't alone that day. I saw it. I've got your back. Elena smiled for the first time in days. Thank you. That matters. Carlos visited the next week. They sat on the porch, eating barbecue and watching the sun sink behind the trees. Did you do it right? He said, biting into a rib. I didn't do anything special, she replied. Exactly. He nodded. That's what makes it powerful. She looked out at the quiet, still street and finally allowed herself to breathe. But even with justice served, the weight of it all hadn't fully lifted, because Elena knew this wasn't just about her. It never had been. It didn't end with the apology, the firings, or the headlines. Those things came and went, but the conversation lingered, in quiet circles, in family kitchens, in training rooms where officers sat watching new videos and listening to new instructors telling them what they should have known from the start. For Elena, life returned to its rhythm. Training weekends, work, errands, the usual. But something had changed. People treated her differently, some with a bit more caution, others with open admiration, a few with barely veiled resentment. She didn't waste time sorting them out. What mattered most came in the form of a single envelope that arrived 2 weeks later, no return address. Inside was a letter from a 19-year-old named Daniela Vega, who had just enlisted in the Army Reserve and had seen the video online. "I didn't think I could do this," Daniela wrote. "I always worried about how I'd be seen, if they'd question me, if they'd think I didn't belong. But I saw you calm, proud, strong, and I knew I could do it too. Thank you for wearing that uniform and not backing down." Elena held the letter for a long time. She'd never set out to inspire anyone. She just didn't want to be humiliated for no reason. But maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not a grand speech or a protest, but standing your ground when someone's trying to erase you. With one gesture, her story wasn't one of violence or heated arguments. It was about breaking the silence at the right moment, with the right voice. That single phone call, calm, precise, made under pressure, had changed everything. Carlos, ever direct, summed it up best when they met again for lunch. "You didn't panic, you didn't yell, you let them expose themselves. That's why they lost." Elena nodded. "Yeah, but they'll try it with someone else, somewhere else probably," she said. He set his fork down. "But the difference now is people are watching." He was right. The gas station had new cameras. The police department now required extra training before officers could return to active patrol. Community liaisons met monthly with local military representatives to discuss issues before they became news. And for her, she stayed quiet publicly but never silent privately. She wrote letters to other service members who reached out. She spoke at small veteran events, answered every message from young recruits asking how to carry themselves under pressure, but she also made time for herself. She started running again, took road trips again, visited her godmother in Phoenix, and cooked pozole for a group of kids who'd never tried it before. Because surviving a moment like that doesn't mean you live in it forever. You heal, you grow, you move forward, and sometimes you hold the system accountable, not by raising your voice, but by refusing to be dismissed. For every person who said, "That's just how things are," Elena silently responded, "They don't have to be. Not if you know who to call, not if you stand your ground, not if you remember who you are, with or without the uniform." If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the importance of being seen, respected, and heard, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, talk about it, and most importantly, subscribe for more stories that matter. Stories that remind us what quiet courage really looks like.